I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The board will now into executive session pursuant to the following. Did my mic go off? Pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code, Section 551.074 to discuss personnel or to hear complaints against personnel. And the time is 5:30. The board will now reconvene into open session. The time is 6:01. Item 4, matters from executive session. A, personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074. 1, possible action regarding routine personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments. A, principal of Oak Grove Elementary. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Leos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item B, principal of Royal Ridge Elementary. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Winkley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item C, Director of Guidance Services. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item D, Senior Director of Career and Technology Education. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Mr. Byer? Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding proposed recommendation for termination of Chapter 21 probationary contract employee. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 3, introductions. Dr. Micah.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my pleasure. Let's see, I'll go in the same order as the agenda. So the new principal for Oak Grove Elementary School will be Rocio Gutierrez Ochoa. The new principal for Royal Ridge Elementary will be Jacob Coyasso. The new director of guidance services will be Rose Garcia. And the new senior director for career and technical education will be Justin Misseldine. That is all the introductions I have.
Thank you very much. Item 5, presentations. A, budget study session number 2. Mr. Villarreal. I'm sorry, it's
Yes.
a habit. I just look up and you're not there.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests, and the EDs in the back row. Tonight, we bring you budget study session number 2. Susie Lackhorn and Valerie Retta, our Director of Employee Benefits, and Susie Lackhorn, our Director of Budgeting, will be doing this presentation. Mr. Moy is at his son's graduation that's going to start in 25 minutes. So, yeah, his son's graduating from another district, so we don't want to.
Well, it's still very exciting.
It's very exciting, so yes, yeah.
So congratulations to him.
To Brian. I'll let him know that you said that, so.
Well,
But-
seriously.
No, He said he was going to stream it from there, so I said, your wife's not going to let you stream art, so. Just in case. So tonight, at our second budget study session, we're going to cover campus staffing, compensation, health insurance, AARs, legislative update, and general fund summary. Next time, we will be in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, we'll be doing final updates, detailed budget view, and other topics as needed, and an adoption on June 24th. So with that, a recap from budget study session number 1. We talked about this extensively. Increased property values do not increase overall M&O revenue. 2.5 limitation is on overall M&O tax collections. Homeowners may still see a tax increase greater than 2.5 if their home value increased despite further compression of the tax rate. Still a lot of unanswered questions, even 2 weeks ago and today. I mean, we still have a lot of unanswered questions regarding federal money, but we'll discuss. Several area districts have more access to revenue than NEISD. We talked about that. Teacher compensation at the beginning of the scale needs to be addressed. Debt service can lower INS tax rate for the 7th year in a row and continue to pay down debt early. And school nutrition, we talked about feeding students for free next year. Agenda, staffing, compensation, and like I said, health insurance. Ms. Rueda will be covering that topic. Additional allocation request, legislative update, and general fund summary. And with that, I turn it over to Ms. Lackborn.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, executive staff, and I'm so happy to have an audience tonight. It's nice to have a crowd again, because I know they're just all anxiously awaiting great information here. All right, let's get started with staffing. So last week, we talked a little bit about enrollment and how that impacts our staffing levels. So in 2021, before the pandemic, we had no idea what the impact of the pandemic would be on our enrollment. So we staffed it for over 63,000 students and then crossed our fingers, and we had 60,000 students come back right away. So we were staffed at 63,000, and TEA held us all harmless so that we didn't have to cut our staff. Now, we didn't automatically replace people as we went through the year and they left if we didn't have to. But that means with next year an anticipated enrollment of 61,586, that means we will have to cut our allocations for 21-22. Now, some good news is something really strange happened in 2021, beyond all the other strange things that happened in 2021. Our highest day of enrollment actually happened on the next to last week of the school year. So typically, our highest day of enrollment's in the fall. And the spring, you see a gentle decline. So for the first time in my history, and anybody else who could remember, we saw our highest day of enrollment right before the end of school. So we're obviously drawing kids back to the district, and that makes us a little bit more optimistic about next year. And bear in mind that the losses in our enrollment were primarily pre-K, K, and first grade. So let's talk about how those enrollment numbers impact our staffing.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the increase that we saw right at the end of the year, was that in those lower grades or no? Or do you know? Sorry, didn't mean to stump you.
I will get back to you on that one. I don't want to say it off the top of my head without verifying where.
Well, I'm just curious since that seemed to be where we were.
Yeah, I think it was more in the high schools.
Oh, okay.
Some of the kids started coming back near the end of the school year, but we'll get you that number. So
Okay.
there might have been middle and high, but I don't think it was in the lower grades.
Okay.
I think Stan's right, but I'm not ready to stake my everything on it right now. So we'll let you have a little bit more information on it. So, go ahead. Sorry.
Just really quickly, we still see our greatest loss still sitting in the pre-K level, and we see it starting to have some students enrolled back in towards the first and K and first, but not to a large degree. To your point, it is mostly secondary that we saw the higher increase.
And what was that number? I'm just curious to know that.
It was close to 60,700. All right, back to staffing, right? Sorry. No, it's okay. So, to adjust for our changes in enrollment, That means we'll need to reduce teaching FTEs, full-time equivalents, by 69. That's roughly 1.6% of our total number of teachers. That'll be 34 teachers at elementary, 21 at middle, and 14 at high school. And remember, keep in mind that we have a 22-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio at our K through 4. And so if the kids come back in different areas, or if we get a lot more kids than what we're projecting, then we will need to add staff back to maintain that 22-to-1 ratio. And in our budget, we include a $3 million contingency to allow for the hiring of staff very quickly. And that way we don't have to come back to you with a budget amendment every time we need to add staff when we're trying to meet those requirements in the start of the school year and kids are enrolling and everybody's trying to get settled in. And I just have a couple of bullets here to help you remember the change in enrollments from the previous years. For non-teaching professionals, we're looking at a 17 FTE reduction, saving $1.5 million. And campus assistant FTEs, another 17 reduction, and that'll save us $500,000. Now bear in mind, this slide is for the general fund only. So we will be doing some things for like mental health counselors and other things out of federal funds. So this does not include the district's entire staffing, but just the staffing charge to the general fund, okay, that impact this budget. And also that $3 million contingency can also be used to hire special ed assistants or other staff that we need. You know, we staff special ed assistants based off of our anticipated needs. But as students enroll and we see their needs, we may need to add some of those back. And so we'll use that same contingency to do that. All right, so let's talk about compensation. Here is our 10-year pay raise history. As you can see, we've also added in Texas Consumer Price Index just to get a feel for the impact to our staff and what inflation's doing. And historically, we've typically picked a percentage for professionals. Sometimes it's a different percentage for our hourly employees and applied that across the board. 2019 was kind of strange as HB3 mandated longevity increases for experienced teachers. So we had to differentiate for them. So that's the one unique, but throughout the years, it's been a percentage or a retention across the board. And this is what a 1%, 2%, and 3% would typically cost the district. So 1% is $4 million, 2 is 8, and 3 is 12. Last time, we took a look at some of our teacher salaries and how they compared to area districts around us. And we showed you that all of the different year buckets were less than our competitors nearby, but those beginning years of the scale were less competitive than those later years. And we've also showed you last time how some of our area districts have more funds available. They went out and got tax rate elections, and so they have more pennies above compressed than we do. So we talked about them having more revenue and being able to pay a little bit higher than what we've historically done. One of the things to remember is also that we're one of the first districts to adopt a budget every year. So we're June 30th, where a lot of the ones in the area are August. And so we come out the door with our compensation plan first, and I would venture to say that a lot of them sit back and wait to see what we do. And so they always have a competitive advantage in that they can see what we're doing and then just go beat it by a little bit, right? So with all this stuff in mind, we've taken a new approach to compensation. And now we intend to target different areas. So this is what the proposed plan looks like. All teachers would receive a minimum of $1,120. That's 2% of midpoint. But some years, especially at the beginning of the scale, would receive more in order for us to even out the steps and try to bring that beginning part of the scale to be more competitive with our neighbors. Starting teacher pay would move from $53,000 to $54,250. We're also targeting our hourly employees by giving at least a minimum of a 3% raise. Now, certain hard-to-fill positions will see the entry levels increase, and they'll see different increases An example is special education assistants. So we have a really hard time drawing them in and retaining them. So we'll target them and give them a new entry rate and a slightly different increase, but it'll be at least a 3%. So if you look through the rest of this, nurses and counselors would be 2% of midpoint. Campus and central office administration would be 1.5%. Together, this makes up about $9.8 million in costs. We'll show you school nutrition next week. So bear in mind, this $9.8 million is for the general fund. So the other side of the coin when we're talking about compensation is the district's contribution to health insurance. And you can see here, historically, we've definitely been blowing away the competition in the contribution per employee. In 2020, we contributed $5,300 per employee. The average of our area ISDs was less than 4,000, just under 4,000. So that's 33% more than what those districts are contributing. And over the last 5 years, it's increased for the district 25%, whereas those area ISDs increased on an average 15.9%. Each year, in the budget office, we go through looking at all the area districts and their plans. We look at the plans that look like ours. So what we like to do is find the ones that look most like us. So these are all plans from area districts with an 80-20 plan. And we look for ones that are most similar in network size and these items in front of you, deductible and co-pays. And so, full disclaimer, there are a handful of plans not included that would cost less, but their networks are real restricted. And so really small networks shouldn't compare with us as smoothly because we have a Blue Cross Blue Shield network and our staff doesn't have to fight real hard to find qualifying providers.
And this is an 80-20 plan. We also provide a 90-10 plan that none of our peer districts give to their employees, or that option to give to their employees. So this is the 80-20 plan. Like I said, 90-10, there's no comparison because nobody else does it.
So down here at the bottom, we're comparing the monthly premiums. And as you can tell, on employee only, only 2 districts are cheaper on employee only. And then in every other category, we are cost less for our employees, and sometimes it's pretty significant. So let's look at how that impacts net pay. So this chart has a lot of numbers, but I'll walk you through them as smoothly as I can. So the first line is our average teacher compensation. And so their annual pay on average at each of those peer districts and ourselves. And then below that's monthly base pay. So your compensation divided by 12. And the monthly base pay for Northeast is $47.89. And if you look, 4 out of the 5 peer districts make a little bit more in base pay. Peer C is the only one. Their base pay is $45.68. It's $221 less than ours. Peer A is $67 higher. Peer B is $115. Once we take that monthly base pay and then start deducting insurance premiums, things start to change. So, looking at employee only, if I take our $107 per month for that premium from our monthly base pay of $47.89, then that average teacher in Northeast, the net pay is $46.82. And we did the same thing for all the peers, taking their monthly pay minus their insurance premium. And so as you can see, peer B was bringing in more in their monthly base pay, $115 more, but once you factor in their health insurance premium compared to ours, now you're making more money at Northeast by $18 a month. And so you can see this progress. When you get to employee child, then 4 out of the 5 peer districts are no longer more than Northeast. We are now, Northeast is net pay is higher than those 4. And the only one where the net pay is lower is in Peer E. And we do the same thing here with the employee spouse premiums and the employee family premiums. And as you can see, in employee spouse, the only district still with higher net pay is Peer E. By the time you get to employee family, it's all higher at Northeast. And one of them's $1,000 a month. So now that we've talked a little bit about how health insurance premiums impact net pay, here's Valerie Rueda, who's going to talk about our health insurance plan. She's our Director of Employee Benefits.
Thank you, Susie. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. My name is Valerie Rueda. I'm the Director of Employee Benefits, and I'm going to present to you the self-funded health plan budget proposal for 2022. So we'll start with a COVID-19 update. Last budget presentation last year, we let the board know that we were covering with our health plan our COVID testing, COVID treatments, and telehealth services. So we wanted to show you what that impact was for 2020. Our total spend for COVID-19 testing and treatment was $1.6 million, which is approximately 2.3% of our total spend. $0.6 million, or 8,269 tests were administered, was for testing, and then $1 million was for treatment of COVID. Our telehealth services cost us about $1.6 million for 19,417 visits. So we're glad to see that our employees were able to get assistance via telehealth, because during that time, a lot of restrictions were in place. You weren't going to the doctor face-to-face anymore. And we see that our employees were taking advantage of that telehealth services, so we're happy to see that. And those were all provided to our employees and family members of the employees at no cost. So we waived our co-payments, deductibles, and co-insurance for all of those COVID-related items. And we will continue to do so through December 31st of 2021. Now we look at our health plan enrollment, and this is a side-by-side comparison of our 2020 to 2021 current enrollment. Currently, we sit at 6,635 employees enrolled in our health plans, which makes up 75% of our employees that are benefits eligible are taking advantage of our health plans. So that's very nice to see for us as well. Our hospital indemnity, we see 2,190 enrollees, which is a difference last year of about 61 people. In total, we have 8,825 employees that are benefits eligible. All in all, we have seen a reduction of about 90 employees in our health plan and in our hospital indemnity plan. And we think that's because of the job vacancies that we had in our district. Overall, we still cover 14,000 members. That includes our dependents. And our dependents, we did see a reduction of 95 dependents in there as well. All in all, it's 124 members that we saw a reduction in our total membership. And usually reductions in dependents are due to either deaths, divorce, gain of coverage elsewhere, and age outs where the dependent ages out at age 26. This is our district and employee premium contributions as a percentage of our total revenues. As you can see, the district covers 72% of our total revenues through district contribution, and the employee's contribution attributes to 28% of our total revenues. And if you look back to 2012 and 13, we were at 64% and 36% respectively. So you can see the gap is getting wider and wider. The district is picking up more and more of the revenues. This is a comparison of our medical and pharmaceutical paid claims for 2019 and 2020. Overall, we did see a total increase of $4.5 million, of which $0.1 million was for pharmaceuticals and $4.4 million was for the medical claims. We also like to look at what's the cost of healthcare per employee. And so every year we compare our membership versus the total paid claims. And we're looking at $10,468 per employee is what it costs us to have the plan, which is up $366 from the previous year. And just to give you an update on the medical and the pharmaceutical side, overall we saw a 7% increase in 2020, plan year 2020. of which case 9% increase in just the medical costs alone. Professional services were up 3%, and facility outpatient was down 18%. Inpatient was up 47%. And we'll get a little bit more into that on the next slide. We also saw pharmaceutical costs increase for less than 1%. Specialty drugs were up 20%, and our traditional drugs were down 10%. Now, Blue Cross Blue Shield projects an 8% increase in our costs for the plan year for 2022. So where do our dollars go? 25% of our dollars went to inpatient facility services. 14% of our dollars went to outpatient facility. Last year, these two were at 18%. So we did see a difference in where the monies were going. And due to COVID, there were some restrictions on elective procedures during 2020. So that caused the outpatient services to go down and then increased our inpatient services. We have professional services of 31%, pharmaceuticals accounted for 23% of our spend, administrative fees 5%, and then our cost of reinsurance was 2%. So for 2022 plan year, but this is our preliminary budget, 71.01 million is what we're expecting in revenue, and our projected plan expenses are 75.28 million, for an overall projected net loss of 4.27 million. So how are we going to address this shortfall? We're proposing some premium changes. Our first is the employee premium increase of 10%, which will yield 2 million in revenue. And our premium difference will range from $9 to $72 per month, depending on the plan and the coverage level. We're also offering one of 3 options for the district contribution. Option 1 is 0 increase to the district, so no district contribution increase. Option 2 is a 2% increase, which will yield $1 million in revenue. And option 3 is a 4% increase for $2 million in revenue. And we'll go through the slides to show you what that impact is on the bottom line. Before we do that, we want to show you what our premium increase history looks like. This is a 5-year look back, and in the last 4 years, we have done 0 increases to the employee. In those 5 years, we have had 3 increases to the district contribution, ranging from $40 to $30. Most recently, $30 in 2018 and $40 in 2021.
And if we were to show you, even prior to 17, there was a lot of years that we did not increase on the employee side, but the district contribution went up, and that's that graph that went from 64 to 72% contribution. So I just wanted to make that point. I mean, we didn't go looking that way too far, but there was many years where we didn't pass any increases.
And just in 2021, our increase of $40 was actually 9.6% increase, which yielded $3 million in revenue. So our proposed monthly premiums are as follows. As you can see, everything is going up at between $9 to $72. Our lowest plan, which is $92 for the high deductible health plan employee only, will go to $101, and that's the $9 increase. Our most expensive plan, which is our our high PPO plan for employee and family, is going from $719 to $791, and that's $72 difference there. But you should know that the majority of our employees are in the low PPO plan. That's 74% of our members are in that plan. And so they'll see an increase between $11 to $44, depending on which plan coverage they choose. At the bottom, we have option 1, 2, and 3, and we've indicated how much that district contribution will increase. If we do option 1, of course, it's $0 because there's no district contribution increase. Option 2 will be $10 additional to the district, and then option 3 will be a $20 increase. So now we're going to look at each projection according to the option. So this is option 1, no district increase. We start off with our projected revenue of $71.01 million. District premium increase is 0, so that won't bring in any additional revenue. And our employee premium increase of 10% will bring in $0.97 million. And I'm sorry, we're looking at the fiscal year section. Altogether, our increased revenue will be $71.98 is what our projected revenue is. Our recommended funding, which means the expected claims we're expecting, would be $67.10 million. Reinsurance, $1.8 million, and claims administration of $3.7. Total expenditures that we're expecting is $72.60 million, yielding us a projected net loss of $0.62 million, and for the plan year, $2.33 million. If we go to option 2, this is a 2% increase to the district contribution. We start off again with a projected income of $71.01 million. Then we have our district contribution of 2%, which will bring in $0.52 million. And again, the employee increase will bring in $0.97 million for a total of $72.5 million. With the same expected expenditures, $72.60. With this scenario, we look at a projected net loss of $0.10 million, or for the plan year, $1.3 million loss. Option 3, this is a district increase of 4%. Again, starting off with the $71.01 million. The 4% increase will bring in $1.14 million in additional revenue, and for the employee side, $0.97 for a total of $73.12 million. Again, with the same expenditures expected, $72.60, we're now looking at a net income of $0.52 million, or for the plan year, a loss of $0.04 million. So here's our financial summary. If we look back at 2020, we did see a net increase of $1.1 million, which was added to our fund balance and brought it up to $22,477,250. And when we look at that in terms of number of months of expenditures, that's 4.0. For 2021, we're expecting a $198,000 increase to our fund balance, so that'll bring it up to $22,675,250 for a total of 3.9 months worth of expenditures. What we're proposing is option number 1, which is 0 increase to the district and a 10% increase to the employees. And that'll yield a $620,000 loss. So our fund balance will go down by $620,000, leaving us with $22,055,250. And in terms of expenditures, that's 3.8 months. So even though we're seeing a loss, we feel like the fund balance can absorb it, and we can still maintain a healthy fund balance after that.
And as a reminder, we talked about how much more the district puts into than other districts, and our peer districts is 33% more that we contribute than any other district. In the last 5 years, it averaged out to almost 25%. So we're paying, as a district, we contribute a lot more than what other districts are contributing. And Blue Cross said we're looking at 8% increase, but we're looking at 10% for the employees, and it's because there's just a minimal amount of employees. So it's not going to cover everything, and that's why there will be a loss that I think the fund balance can take on, the health insurance fund balance.
Now, you got to understand, too, that the new rates do not take effect until January 1 of 2022. So the employees still have the rest of this year under the regular rates, and then they will kick in on the 1st of January. And then employees also have the opportunity to make changes to their plan come open enrollment, which is always October of this year. That way they can make changes if they feel like they need to change plans or make adjustments for their own personal budgets.
And these rates, when we did comparisons between pay and take-home pay, you have to remember that also that some of these school districts are starting to do their budget study sessions, and they're going to be probably going up on their health insurance. So the numbers that we gave you is current, but that probably be a bigger gap once they start passing on their increases. So that's just a comparison that we're giving you at a certain point.
And even with our 10% increase on the employee side, we're still going to be lower than our peer districts. So do we have any questions?
We're going to, we can come back also, Madam President, because we still have a couple of more slides to go through different, and then if there's health insurance questions, we can answer them at the very end. I'm sorry.
Yep. And I'll give it back to Susie. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you. All right. So one thing we do every year is to allow campuses and departments to request additional funds. And this process is called additional allocation request. And so they have to answer a series of questions. Executive staff and Dr. Micah then go through and evaluate them. And so here are the ones that we're looking at adding to the budget for 21-22. Total of 1.1 million. Notice that none of the dollars are in staffing. It's all in non-staffing costs. We break this up by division, so Dan's very disappointed that he's the most expensive this year. It's very counter to what he normally does. He paid me to say that. But the biggest increase for business services, of course, is property insurance premiums. So when you have a major snowstorm like that, it's almost impossible to get out of having increased premiums the next year, as those insurance companies probably paid out a lot of money in insurance claims.
And I
So-
think they're still upset that they gave us 24 million 5 years ago for the hail damage, so.
Yes. And then this year too, we've had a lot of little hailstorms that will impact, so they might have been little to us, but they weren't always little to everybody that they're insuring.
But
so.
we did bid it out. We're bidding it out, so it's not like we're just taking whatever rate they're gonna give us. So hopefully, we're just trying to forecast what it could actually go up, so.
So we're also looking at Google's changing the way their subscription works, and so they've tiered it. And so Google Workspace Education Plus provides better security and more student engagement per Google. So I can't attest to the student engagement, but this would also add to next year's budget. And then we are changing kind of some of our concepts in how our departments manage replacement schedules. So this additional library resources is meant for the library services department to replace and update their collection and provide technology resources. In the past, we've leveraged the bond a lot to update collections and things like that for the library services. So this is a start on building a replacement schedule for them and keeping them up to date through their budget, and instead of relying on bond programs to provide that. So we also have some supplemental pay for instructional technology specialists. Along the same line as library services, for campus administration, we have ROTC uniform replacements. So the same concept. This will add money to their budget so that they can replace those uniforms on a regular basis and keep up to date. For the Division of Instruction, a lot of smaller, unique items, dyslexia intervention materials, Cyber Patriot coaching stipends at the secondary school, an operating budget for a new cybersecurity magnet program, and a few other items there for $150,000. The operations department, this is for a maintenance contract on our natural turf fields. So back in the 2015 bond, we had a repair project for that natural turf, and it included a maintenance contract. That maintenance contract is, I'm having trouble saying maintenance contract for some reason, I don't know, I'm sorry, is expiring. And so this is something that does fertilization, aeration, pest control for those fields, and we feel it's a worthwhile thing to continue as it's a preventative measure. And so hopefully it will help us not have to do another big repair and save us money in the long run. And that's it for AARs, additional allocation requests. And so it was a short and quick list. And now Dan's going to talk to us about the legislative update.
No.
You're not?
No, yes, I am. I'm sorry.
I was
No,
like-
there's not a lot. I mean, there is a lot, but not really affecting us as much. I'm sorry. This is from Deb, so she would do a lot better job. But House Bill 1525 was the HB cleanup bill and included many changes to school funding, and it changed some of the career and tech funding weights, as you can see up there. And it did change the CTE allotment. And talking to TASBO, they kind of try to figure out how much we might get or lose. They're projecting that we might lose around $100,000 on these CTE weights. And then, but it did revive gifted and talented allotment, removed by HB 3 in 2019. We didn't have it for the 2 years, but Now we do, and it expands allowable uses of the compensatory education allotment and school safety allotment, and allows for instructional materials allotment to be used to support distance learning. However, no bill was passed by sine die that would allow for remote instruction, so we don't know why they're saying that. But we're estimating to get an additional state funds of 1.1 million, so that's good. And then this one is Senate Bill 1 rider for HB 1525, and this is kind of like the commissioner, TA commissioner getting a ton of money. So it removes 1.1 billion from the foundation school program, and it takes 620 million from the technology and instructional materials allotment. And if you can see, it goes to the commissioner to allocate as he sees, and these are some of the items that he can do with. For instance, 406 million to changes in instructional practice, whatever that means. And then down there, there's a reimbursed URI cost via reimbursement of 35 million. We don't really know what that's about, but anyway, commissioner's getting like $1.7 billion to be able to use in the next biennium. And ESSER 2 funding, TA announced last week that we were going to get $52,141,000, but they're going to be taking the 6.5 for hold harmless, and they'll leave us with $45,578,000. The U.S. Department of Education said that they're consolidating all 3 ESSER programs, so whatever we use for 1 or 3, we can use with 2. So that's still to be written, but we can use all 3 the way they mandate us for us to use it. So with that, we get to the general fund recap.
Thanks,
Susie.
Ian. Thanks, Ian. All right, so we've talked about a lot of key components of the budget. So let's put those numbers together and take a look like what that looks like in total. So the 2021 forecast for the current year is 551 million. And as you can see, 86% of that's in salaries and benefits. This is a trend you'll always see as we are a service industry and we're heavy in staff. So since we're not selling widgets, most of our cost is in salaries and bennies. Just a note, I even hate having to bring it up, but I said it a lot last year. If you remember, ESSER 1 supplanted $10 million. So the state in 1920 said, I'm going to give you $10 million less in state revenue, and I'm going to give you $10 million in ESSER 1 federal revenue. And so in 2021, we had to take the same amount of expenditures and move them from the general fund into ESSER 1. And so 2021 is missing all those costs. So we're going to bring them back into 21, 22. But it's just one of those very things that made 2021 more unique than it already was. So let's look at 21, 22. So we bring back the ESSER 1 money. This forecast of $563.8 million includes that proposed compensation plan and the option 1 on health. The one thing that is very significant that it does not include is anything that we're going to move to ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. So those plans are still in development, but we will be moving some cost over to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. We just don't have exact numbers or where they'll fall at this point in time. So bear that in mind. We're showing you the numbers without that included. All right, so the difference between these 2 years is about 12.7 million, and these are the items that are driving that. The first one is bringing back that 10 million in salaries from ESSER 1. Then 9.8 in the compensation plan we showed you earlier. We talked about the reduction in campus staffing of 6.6 million. 2021 has some one-time costs, retention and significant repair costs from the snowstorm. So we'll take those out of 21-22's forecast. Last summer, we approved increasing the district contribution to health insurance, and that runs January through December. So we're going to have 1.9 million of July through December costs compared to 2021. We talked just a few minutes ago about the additional allocation requests. One more item that we're going to look at for next year is increasing our sub rate for their daily rate for and their pay, and that'll cost roughly $400,000. In 2019, Senate Bill 12 mandated that our teacher retirement payments increase. So they increased the rates in several items, and we're going to continue to see this throughout the years, and that'll cost us about $500,000 next year. We also have additional costs for reading academies. That's yet another thing HB3 did. It feels like I'm spending a lot of time in 21 talking about a bill from 2019. Earlier this year, you had a presentation on Jackson Keller, Cerna, and Larkspur moving to an intersessional calendar, and these are the costs associated with that. We'll also get additional revenue for those campuses with those additional the ADA for the additional days. But this is, again, it's just the expenditure budget. And we've got a lot of other little items, so this makes up your $12.7 million. Now, bear in mind, some of these things are going to move over to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. I'm only going to say it like 12 times tonight, so this does not include that yet. So eventually, there'll be a nice number decreasing all of this. But since our ESSER 2 application isn't due till September, and our ESSER 3 application isn't due until the end of July, and all those plans are still in place, we don't have those numbers to include in the budget at this time. This July. All right, so let's put that all together with some revenue. So our 2021 forecast has us dropping $12.5 million to fund balance and increasing our months of fund balance to 3.2. And bear in mind that 2021 doesn't have that $10 million in costs for ESSER 1 that we moved out. 2021 also had a really nice one-time revenue source of $13 million from property value audits. And so those come in, they came in very slowly, so they actually, it was several years worth. And so that's not something we'll see in 21-22 to that extent. All right, so now I've got two columns. I've got the 21-22 preliminary budget and the 21-22 forecast. The preliminary budget has a $27 million loss, but our budgets are always worst case scenario. So this includes staff being hired and being here the entire year. No one leaves, everybody works every day. And it includes us spending that entire $3 million contingency, hiring more staff, but it doesn't have the extra revenue we would have gotten because we had more kids. So again, it's worst case. It also includes every budget manager, every principal spending every dollar of their discretionary budget. And I can tell you right now, there's a bunch of budget managers in this room who would never get anywhere close to spending all of their budget. I'm one of them. So, again, the budget's worst case scenario, and the world would have to align in really strange ways for it to actually happen. It also doesn't include anything moving over to ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. So what we really think will happen in 21-22 would be a $12 million loss. And that includes all the savings from all the spending that doesn't happen, and vacancies, and all those things. But even this isn't exactly what will happen, because once our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 plans are built out, some of these costs will move out and into those plans. So this number is actually higher than what it will actually turn out to be. But even so, even without moving those costs out to ESSER 2 and 3, we'd still have 2.9 months of fund balance. And that is the summary and recap for the impact of all these things on the general fund. And now Dan is going to recap tonight for us.
So key takeaways: employee contribution rate to health insurance will increase. Compensation plan ranges from 1.5 to 3% and includes targeted adjustments. Legislative impact to state aid is still an estimate. ESSER 2 is a mix of state supplant and new money. Amount of local ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 supplant to be determined. And budget is not the same as our forecasted actual results. It includes 100% personnel fill rates and 100% spending. So that forecast of 12, like Susie was talking, that 12.1, once we come up with our plans and we're able to submit, we'll be able to see how much we can move in from ESSER 2 or 3 monies and we should be in good shape. But even with the $12 million loss, we would still be at 2.9, and that's probably worst-case scenario. Questions?
Ms. Williams, did you have questions?
Yes, but I'll let Mr. Byer go. It's okay. Thank you for that extensive and comprehensive presentation. I just had a couple of questions. So early on, you had mentioned that, excuse me, the cost to the district, and of course, we're self-funded, so it is $10,468 per employee. Do we, there it is. So do we compare or ever compare this cost to other self-funded organizations and kind of, you know, see how we?
To our knowledge, we're probably one of the only school districts that are self-funded. And, you know, that's why we've had a pretty stable, providing Blue Cross since '95. Now, we do bid out the networks and Blue Cross usually gets it, but a lot of times other districts, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with them, they tend to chase rates every 2 years. Other districts, if you talk, because I have siblings that work in other districts, and they're always complaining about their health insurance because they're fully insured plans. So if you think about it, they call it chasing the rates, and we don't have to do that. We try to control our self-funded rates by evaluating. I think Steve and Valley do a good job working with Blue Cross and Blue Shield to determine and to evaluate and, you know, look at all the details. You know, we try to provide a service and we try to be direct. They look at all the costing. They look at all the reinsurance costs that, you know, we might be able to save. So I think we do a pretty good job of managing me. But to your question, I'm sorry. As far as self-funded insurance plans, I think we're the only district in the state. They might have one or two somewhere else. Do you know of any, Val?
Right. Our peer districts are usually fully insured. I've had conversations with Northside, who's considering doing a self-funded plan, and they've come to us to kind of ask us how we're doing it and how our funds are going. But I know in the past, Mr. Tovar has done a comparison to a Mercer study that compares this across, you know, the nation, and the average cost has been about $13,000 per employee. So we're way below that. So we do look at those statistics, but it's really hard to compare ourselves when nobody else is doing it.
Thank you. And then one other clarification on the chart that you had, that the pie chart that looked at, yes, that one. I'm just assuming that professional at 31% means like doctor visits and
Yes,
things
ma'am.
like that related to that.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
The administrative costs that we pay Blue Cross is the 5% of the total. But yeah, professional is all your specialists and things of that type.
That's all I have.
Had a few questions. Back on the staffing at the very beginning, we were talking about 69 positions. Did we talk about, or I guess I didn't see anything, we talked about retirements and all that.
Yeah.
How does all this?
We will have plenty of retirements to cover.
Okay.
It's only 1.6% of our
teachers
teachers.
leaving and all
Yeah.
that.
So-
Mr. Byer, sorry, we always are able to do this through attrition.
Right.
So that's, yeah, I want y'all to remember that. And so we've never had to move to what's called a RIF, a reduction in force.
Right.
We've always handled this through attrition.
And I assume we're looking at those positions at different schools based on populations and that kind of thing. So is there any way that you look at that for, even though a school might have less kids, that it needs more staff? I mean, obviously it's a case-by-case basis, so we're not just going across and saying, you lost 100 kids, so therefore you only get X number of administrators.
Yes, when we go through the staffing, we look at all the factors about their student enrollment, student population. They also have additional funding sources to help offset and give additional support to our Title I campuses, which actually they use that to add additional staff as needed as well.
Okay. For the compensation part of it, I know you said that doesn't include any of the ESSER 2, ESSER 3, so we'll get to that if we ever see any of that money. But one of the things that I looked at or that jumped out at me was some of the positions that got the 3%, I guess, raise, so to speak. Were those to get some of those, were those mainly in the hourly positions?
Those are hourly.
All hourly? And is that to get them to a competitive dollar amount? Okay. So it sounds like we're a little bit low in some spots, so trying to catch people up. Okay.
Look, when we talked about this proposed compensation plan, Susie, Brian, Dan said, do you really want to go here? Because this is complicated. This is a lot. And I said, if we're going to compete for employees, we're going to have to start digging into why we've done certain things. You know, giving flat pay raises across the board we're giving ourselves a competitive disadvantage by doing it. So what we really did is dug into across the board through employees and tried to see where are we the most market misaligned, and then how do we address that?
Yeah.
And again, look, we're not trying to get to the top of the heap.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not going to get there. What we're trying to do is maintain some competitiveness. If you'll remember when we addressed bus drivers, right? We didn't get to the top, but we were able to stay competitive enough
Right.
that we quit losing employees. That's what we're going for
And with
here.
75% of the people that use our health insurance, it's helping with that, some of that difference in some
Correct.
situations.
Yes, sir. That's why, if you'll recall, several years ago, it seems like 20 now with COVID happening, but if you'll recall, when I first took over as interim, I spent a lot of time talking about our health insurance to our employees. Because again, it was something we had invested in a lot as a district, but very few people really understood its impact with take-home pay. And so that's why we've done, in fact, Valerie and Steve and those guys, when we go out and recruit people, there is actually a recruitment flyer that we show. Yeah, you may make $1,500 more in this neighboring district, but you're actually going to take home this much more money in doing it. So we really try to advertise that to a great extent.
And with speaking of the health insurance, I know we've done such a great job over the last few years to keep those premiums stagnant and for the employees. Were there any scenarios you were able to look at where there was maybe a little bit by the district and a little bit by the teachers or the staff that still got us to that deficit of $620,000? Basically trying to meet a little bit here and not just put all 10% on the staff and the district not increase any contribution.
Right, we looked at various scenarios. We try to, see what comes out of it, by changing different factors. And then having seen that the district has absorbed a lot of costs during the last 5 years, it was kind of like, you just see that split getting larger and larger, that gap of the total revenues and, and then also just the consideration that we haven't raised any premiums at all for the employee. Was all taken into account, and those 3 scenarios were the best scenarios that we could come up with.
And we were trying to stay, below 70%, so this might help it a little bit. But also, our 90-10 plan is very expensive.
Yeah.
And, it's something that we're still providing that no one out there provides. Even some private sector employers aren't providing 90-10 plans. A lot of the districts have gone to 80-20, 70-30 plans. So just trying to stay, I guess, within a certain amount for the district. Like, it is difficult when you pass on, but I wish we would have showed what we've done in the last 15 years as far as increasing premiums to employees, and it's very rare that we ever pass anything to the
Yeah,
employees.
and
Every year, we're ranging from 8 to 12% increase on our health insurance.
Right.
But we've never passed that on. So.
And Mr. Byer, when we look countywide at what other districts have been doing over the years, they've really been elevating their health insurance premiums
Yeah.
significantly more than we have. And so we did look at scenarios. Some of them were worse, by the way, than 10%. What we were trying to do is trying to hit a sweet spot.
Right.
And trying to not, should you all vote for what we've proposed this evening, to make sure that the employee actually felt a pay raise rather than us give this money and then take it away in that piece, right?
Yep.
So that's really the balancing act in it. And they ran a lot of scenarios to try to get us to this point. We looked at too many. And really trying also to look at who does get hurt in this process, should we go this route, and trying to minimize the impact to the fewest amount of employees possible. And so that was always kind of the goal.
Well, and with, you said most of the employees are in the low PPO
Yes, sir.
range, and I guess what percentage would be that group that's having to pay the employee plus family? That's the largest increase of $44.
Yes, sir. The employee only, I think, was $9.
Yeah, that was,
Well, that's for the high deductible.
Yeah.
If you're looking at just employee only and the low PPO, it was $11.
11. On the, one other quick question on the additional allocation part of this we were looking at, there was a cyber security operations for $35,000. What does that include? Is that just the new building, or is that?
No, that's their operating budget, so that's for them to
Okay.
buy instructional materials and things
Okay.
like that for
I'll
during
say
the
that
year.
seems like a great deal if that's operating that building, so.
No, I wish.
And then on the intersessional campus cost, was that a one-time cost or is that ongoing?
No.
It was like $500,000.
They're ongoing, but remember, we collect
Then we
half-day
collect.
ADA for those 30 extra
Correct.
days.
Okay.
Correct. So see, again, she's going to show you the worst-case scenario, because that's what we have to show, but we're going to get money back.
Correct.
Once those extra 30 days are done.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes. Got it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a pretty big lag between us spending the costs
Right.
and getting the revenue. So we
Yep.
won't see that revenue until well after the summer of the next year. So you'll
it.
complete the year, send the ADA to TEA, the average daily attendance, and then it'll be after that we'll start seeing the revenue for
Come
it.
back.
And so, but it'll come.
It'll be, great. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Anybody else down there?
Thanks. Do you mind going to slide 46? I was just trying to look at a couple of the things under the contract service and supplies and materials. And I'm new, so I'm just trying to compare it to the current budget, the different lines of accounting. And under the supplies and materials, line 12 on the current budget is instructional resources and media services, about 8.7 million. But there's another 10, 11 million here. Where other lines of accounting would that tie to from the budget, or is that, I know it's different, kind of different. And are we going to get to that at the next study
Yes.
session?
So, and then in our next meeting, we're gonna take this budget and we're gonna slice it and dice it in a lot of different ways. And so you have to adopt the budget by function code. And that's what TEA mandates. And so that's the instructional resources, transportation, extracurriculars, it's all those categories. And so, but another way that TEA makes us look at our numbers is this way. And so it's by type of transaction. And so salaries, contracts, supplies. And so in the next meeting, we'll take this same budget and we'll show you every which way.
Okay, great. And this question, I think, may be for Mr. Jarrett. Line 13 is the curriculum instructional staff development. This is on the actual budget. It's $16 million, which is that fall under contract services? And what are we doing with that, this instructional staff development? Are we going outside the district and bringing in $16 million worth of resources and training?
So, I mean, that's a multitude of different things
Okay.
that go on. And so part of our contract service that we do have, that we kind of farm out, is through our Title II funding source, which is actually allocated for staff development. And that was part of that PLC coaching and different things like that. So that's part of the items that's in there, but there's other things that's earmarked for.
And
certain
you all
things.
have some in-house talent that you said y'all have been watching the PLC and some of the stuff that you're gonna try and keep some of that in-house in the out years, so we're not continuing to expend
Exactly.
money on contractors.
Yeah, so we're looking at more of a trainer model.
Okay.
So as we continue to exit in our last cohort of campuses are being
Okay.
onboarded with PLC, then we're talking about how do we go deeper and maintain that practice without having to outsource to different organizations.
But Mr. Hilliard, what Mr. Jarrett saying is there's certain monies we have to spend in PD regardless.
Certainly.
We got to spend it. And so some of it, what we've talked about, in fact, it was early as this morning, we talked about instead of spending it in outside PD, actually paying for people here in our own area, like in this district.
Sure.
And saying rather than bringing in more people, let's use that money to buy people here that then go out and train our folks. Make sense?
It does.
And so that's what we're taking a look at really deeply into that piece of, because again, what's our return on investment with that PD? Is it moving the needle or is it not?
Yeah, well, that's the next question is how do we track and measure that effectiveness
Correct.
and then
Student
obviously let us-
outcomes, that's just very clear.
Yeah.
It's not about whether the
Okay.
people enjoyed it or not, it's about our students getting better, and if they're not, then it's not working. We got to
Agreed.
adjust.
Agreed. Okay. I think that was the big, if we're gonna go line by line, I'll save some of these questions for the next time, because I know I had a couple other questions. The other one was about general administration, what all that covered, because that's a big category and a generic term.
Yeah, we'll show you quite a bit more, and when it comes to central, we split it up in a lot of different ways, and so, but when we get to next time, we'll show you a lot of information on departments, because
Okay.
you've really spent a lot of time right now talking about campuses, and so now granted, campuses make up the bigger percentage of our budget, obviously. And so, but you'll get more detail on departments, and then departments tend to align pretty well with general administration. So, the finance office, that'll be general administration. And so you'll get some of that through the next meeting.
Okay.
And-
And the last question was about the campus principal's budget. If they don't spend it, it comes back to the district, I assume, obviously. I mean, it would make sense that it just rolls year to year as appropriate. And then there's a benchmark that they get a set amount. What's the ballpark amount for high schools?
So we actually have a long formula.
Sure.
And so we take projected enrollment, and then you get by different levels. So high schools get a particular rate per student, middle schools get a different rate, elementaries get a different rate.
Ballpark for it, picking any of the high schools? I mean, ballpark range. I know it's not an exact number. Do you know that one, or you may not? We can get it offline. If
I'm going to say it's 5 figures,
Okay.
and but they're going to vary because it's not just enrollment. It's also we give a higher weight, just like TEA does. We give a higher weight to student mobility.
Mr. Hill, do you want
yeah.
like $1 per child? Or do you just
that's
want
what-
it?
That's
do
one,
you
just
want that?
general idea.
We
Big
can
picture.
bring that,
Yeah.
we'll bring it to you next session.
That's fine.
Rather, because I think Susie's trying to say
Yeah, I
their
know it's
total budget.
It's a variable.
Yeah, so what we can do is say, here's on average what we give per child at the high school, elementary, and mid. And then there are some weights
Yep.
because it just depends. If they're title campuses, they get a little bit more money because the need is a little bit greater. So we
The big picture is
kind
they
of-
have a certain amount. If not, it comes back into the general. fund.
correct.
Oh, yeah.
But every, not just campus, every
Every.
budget,
Every line budget. Okay.
Yeah.
everything that gets done through this budget at the end of the year, we send out a memo and say, whatever money is not spent at this point, we recapture it and we just swoop it in. Yep.
Yep.
I guess last question is, do we start at a zero baseline, or do we just use last year's budget and build on it? Do we ever go back and
So
Look.
we start with last year's budget, and then we make adjustments as necessary. That's not true for campuses. So campuses is all based on that formula. It's the weights
Sure.
based off of your student population. And I was trying to think of economically disadvantaged a minute ago, but so you get more weight for those students. With departments, we start with last year's, but then we go up and down based off of your need. And one of the big ways to change what your budget is as a department budget manager is through those additional allocation requests. And so that money that we were talking about for library services, now that's going to be added to their base budget.
it generally goes, okay.
Yeah.
But year to year, the base budgets stay the same. And like Susie was saying, you'll see any increases to any budgets through the AER process.
Okay, great.
But how many years ago did we cut them by 12%?
I think it was like 4 years ago, and then 2 years before that, we cut them by 5.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So occasionally there are adjustments made back
Correct.
as you relook at.
Oh,
Okay.
yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
And I think in the last 8 years, probably we've cut them like 20, 25%.
Okay. Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
One question. I do want to say thank you very much for the counseling coming out of the federal fund, so it doesn't affect our general budget, and then we can keep the counselors that we need at our campuses, hopefully. But my concern is that that 3%, is that enough to keep us competitive? You know, I worry that, are we gonna fall back when other districts come out with their budgets after us and do the same? And so now we're right back where we started. You know what? I know that it's a vicious cycle because we're always the first and, you know, everybody wants to be on top. But that is a concern.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 2%, minimum of 2%.
But Ms. Winkley, go back to the last session. When they are 8, 9 pennies above compression, they have more money. Period. I mean, we are going to. Again, I don't know that we will ever, at the current structure that we're at, be able to be at the top unless we went out for a TRE. And that's what it would take, because that's the only way for us to generate new monies, short of enrolling more children.
And the last time we met, I guess, we talked a little bit about the TREs that other school districts have. So they're sitting on a lot of money, because remember, if you go up on a TRE, you get actually more state funding. So they also match what you're getting. So those districts are able to spend a lot more money. One of our neighboring districts 10 years ago dropped tons of money, and they're sitting at almost 6.5 months of fund balance. So they kind of go with what we do. So if, I'm not saying let's do this, but if we do 5, they're going to do 6. So I think if we did 0, they'll do 1. I don't think they're going to try to, they're just not going to try to blow us out of the water. It's going to be some of your southern districts who are sitting on a little bit more money because of the circumstance, because of what they did 5 years ago with a TRE, on top of the state giving you more money when you do pass a TRE. Remember the golden pennies, and you get a bronze. So things of that type, I mean, they're sitting on some good dollars, plus HB3 in 2019 gave them some outlets for more money. So it's going to be a fine line, because for us, if you look at our revenue, we're going to be flat. I mean, there's no more new money. Unless we get more students to pick that up, as our expenses go up, I mean, the revenue is going to stay flat. So we have to be real careful. And ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, just today in a webinar I was on, they talk about do not spend it on salaries, because they're saying that in 2 or 3 years, if you add salary now, you're going to be out of money, and they don't want, the state is saying they don't want you to go back to ask them, hey, I did all this, and now I need more money. So we have to be really
And by salary,
careful.
Dan, you mean pay raises?
Yes, sir.
That's what he means by salaries.
And
It's costs that are going to be, that outlive the grant. That's it. And look, I'll just be honest with you. There are districts right now, and so, yeah, we'll just go on the record. Deb, get ready. Y'all, I've described ESSER dollars as a hangman's noose. All right? So you asked a great question about ROI. You already see districts right now throwing money at all sorts of stuff, and they are just throwing it out. In the end, boiled down to, what is that money there for? Why did the federal government give it to school districts? To address learning loss? So how is a $1,000 retention supplement to a bus driver going to help that? But that's what people are doing. All right? Deb, help me here. We just talked about this today. Learning loss, to avoid the next pandemic, to prepare ourselves for the next piece.
Safe, keeping schools open.
Oh, keeping schools open. Those were the big 3 issues. But what you have, and the joke that Dan and I have talked about, is a long time ago, it's kind of how bonds ended up getting so scrutinized, is because one school district built a water park. That's true. And so you get, I'm not kidding y'all, you can't make this stuff up. And so it was. And so what you have and what you're already seeing with these ESSER dollars and TEA is they're really starting to scrutinize and micromanage, because in the end what they believe is districts, many of them, are not going to use it properly. And so what we've had is a lot of discussions about these dollars, is because whatever we do, and in fact Anthony and I had a very passionate discussion this morning, because I said, if you put a crutch in place, in 3 years, how are we going to remove the crutch? Or have we built a crutch now that we can't continue on? Because it has to address it, and it's the slow, to your piece, Mr. Hilliard, about PD, it's how do you do some things and then slowly back your way out of it, so that it is not something that gets put into place that you fund for infinity and beyond. And that's the piece. But what you're seeing, and look, y'all, I am so concerned of the profession, because in 3 years from now, if schools do not get better outcomes, and that is student learning, period. As a system, what's the state going to say? Well, it wasn't more money. That wasn't your problem. So when we spend these monies, we have to be very smart about them. The key, the piece that frustrates me, and I never like things like this, is you got to spend it in 3 years, because it leads to waste, because you have to unload it. But how do you do it in a way that addresses the key pieces that it was designed to do? Look, they've opened it up very wide for us, and that's the piece, is people, oh, well, we can go spend it here. You can, but is that really going to get you where you need to be? That's what we're having the spirited discussions about. You know, one district is talking about, because as you saw in here, no virtual bill passed. One district is saying, well, I'm going to use ESSER dollars, I'm going to create a virtual. I'm going to fund it, which means ADA. That's what they're thinking of using their dollars for. You see, there's all sorts of grand ideas out there, but in the end, Susie, can you flash to that 9-bullet piece where TEA's got all this money?
Yeah.
I want you to look at this and study this just a little bit more. Changes in instructional practice. What does that mean? They don't think we know what we're doing. They don't think we can get our way out of this problem. That's it. We know we got to do better. We have to create better outcomes, period. You know, career-focused high schools, we have those types of things, right? You come down in here to supplemental funding for acceleration for low ESSER. You know, those are districts that didn't come out with a lot of dollars, so they're going to pump some pieces in there. But look at the amount of money in that changes in instructional practice. That's over $1 billion, and as Dan said the other day, that's in dollars.
That was in dollars.
That's, I mean, that's crazy amount of money. And we have been, you know, we've been given a lot of money. It's now how do we use it and spend it wisely and track it back to we got better. That's the key. That's it. And what I'm hearing, and it frustrates me, and Deb has listened to it, as Dan and Rudy and Anthony and anyone else who's unfortunate to sit in my office and hear me lament about this, is that you're already seeing people thinking that, yes, they've opened it up, but so, okay, so you could buy, and for instance, and this isn't necessarily true, but hey, we could buy buses with it, but is that really going to address the problem? So why are you going to spend it that way? Because you can, or because you're really going toward the ultimate goal, which is getting better? We want to get better. That's what we're focused on. And anytime these guys get a little bit off, like today, we have a very spirited discussion about you're losing focus. And we need to get you back to creating better outcomes for kids. That's it. Because no matter what PD we provide, if it doesn't come down to the kids got better, then we did it wrong. Period.
And one of the things that...
Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. Mr. Jarrett, did I
So-
miss anything?
Just the part where you told me to get out your office. That was the one piece.
No,
They know, because I'm extremely passionate about this, and I've said they've given us enough rope that we can hang ourselves if we're not smart with it. And we have got to be smart and show that we know how to do this well, not just go out and spend the dollars.
you know, by the way, they haven't given us a penny. They haven't even told us when we're getting it. We haven't even got a notice of a grant award. Now, the one thing they did tell us is once you get it, there's going to be a lot of requirements. And they were saying that the federal government's going to really audit every single thing you do. So, once we get what we can spend and not spend on, we're going to have to, we're going to be held, and then a plan has to be in place. You can change a plan every few months, I think 6 months, 6 months. But the one thing they stressed today was be careful how you spend it, and you can spend it. The federal government's going to be on you, and it's not something that you should spend
Dan,
on salaries.
but why is the federal government going to be auditing us so tightly?
Because that was a lot of money for a purpose, like Dr. Michael
But what
was
did
talking
the
about.
state do with the first round?
They supplanted.
And there it is.
So
That's it. They supplanted, so the feds are going to micromanage Texas now.
Yes, because
they supplanted the first round.
Because remember, I think way back when we gave you an update, we said they wanted to drop 40% down to fund balance, and I said it was their rainy day fund. Well, the federal government found out, and they said you can't do that. You're not going to get a penny unless you can't. If you try to do that, it's not going to work. It's not allowable. So that's why they opened it up, and so now they're going to give us the money and see what we can do with it. So here's your money. Be careful how you spend it. So.
And that's why ESSER 2 and ESSER 3's impact to the general fund is not in our numbers yet. Just to bring you back to that.
Will you say that one more time?
So these numbers do not include the impact of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3.
Thank you so much. I know that you have worked very hard and are crunching numbers. That's not any fun at all. And to take into account. But I'm grateful that we have a team that is dedicated to finding the right answers, and that, who knows, maybe one day in a magical world, they'll realize how valuable teaching is and teachers are, and they will help us and give us the monies that we need to provide for them. One day.
That would be exactly what, you said it so much better, but it's been running through my head the whole evening. It's childish and it's petty of me and it's simplistic and everything else. I hear and agree with everything that y'all have said about where our money is coming from. I get it. I think we all do. But when are we ever going to get to a point where the people that we value the most, we can show them how we value them? In corporate America, an 8% raise is any day of the week. And we struggle. I'm sorry, but looking at this tonight and seeing only 2 or 3%, it hurt. I want more for our teachers and our staff. They've done an unbelievable job this past year, and that's on top of the work they've done in previous years. So it's very frustrating, and I know I'm a whiny child about it, but
Well, we say it every year,
every single year we say it, every single year.
but we're doing the best we can.
And that's my deep appreciation for this district and this staff and what they do to try to do the absolute best for our teachers. So that part is, but please, somebody somewhere.
Look, so I'm going to get back on that soapbox.
We're up there with you on
Yeah,
that soapbox.
but I want you to, because you all know I sit on this statewide thing now, and I'm talking a lot more with TEA. I want you to understand what comes out of the commissioner's office and how they're seeing it. All right? So we're talking about outcomes, because in the end, any business, right? You're going to produce, there's an input, and you need an output, and you need to measure it. So here's what TEA said through this, and in fact, I went around, Mr. Jarrett and Mr. Jimenez went with me to several schools to talk about this. So let's talk about what the state sees as far as the system. This is not Northeast, this is the system. What they say is, and Commissioner uses it, and Deb, correct me if I get any of these wrong, all right? So let's take a third grader who failed, I believe it was mathematics, right? So what is the chance that that child will be caught up in the 4th grade to approaches as a system? This is the entire state of Texas. Anyone want to venture a guess? Mr. Hilliard, venture a guess. What do you think? What's the percent? Approaches, by the way, is not on grade level. This is approaches just to passing.
This last year was current,
No, sir.
just in general,
Generally historical.
12%.
Yep, you're a little low. It's about 1/3. It's about 35%, I believe. 35%. That's as a system. Now, let's take that same child that failed. Deb, am I right so far? Pretty close, right?
I'm pulling up the PowerPoint.
I knew you were. I knew you were going to your notes. So correct me if I'm wrong. I knew you were turning to your trusty iPad.
Yes, I'm getting there. It's opening.
So now let's take that same child. Let's take that 3rd grader that failed, that we got a 1/3 of them to approaches. Now let's take them to the 5th grade. What's the chances we're going to get them to meets as a system? 5%. Now, I'll just tell you all, and as I explained it to our teachers, I went home that night, and I woke up the next morning, and I had a crisis. And I did. Because I had to look myself in the mirror and say, the system that I've dedicated my entire life to has to get better, period. Because if the best we can do is 5% and that were my son, that is unacceptable. That's what I've charged Mr. Jarrett with, because that's not okay. And then I threw him out. Deb, am I right?
5% is correct.
Correct. Was I right on the 35%? Pretty close.
Yes.
I was within figure. That, though, folks, is what I'm absolutely obsessed with. You've unfortunately seen that obsession before. But y'all, that is unacceptable. As a system, we have to get better. And again, that's how we're approaching everything now is we've got to look at it and say, if it didn't work, does it need to change? Does it need to be abandoned? And how do we do things different? Because in the end, it has to get better. Because see, if we want them to value us, then we got to produce a better output. And that output is kids. And it's learning. And yes, there are a myriad of challenges. Look, I worked at title and non-title. I'm fully aware of it. But in the end, all kids can learn. And all kids can grow. And that's why as a system, what we value, and I value the most, is growth. Because I'm going to pick on you, Mr. Hilliard, just because I'm just looking at you. But if Mr. Hilliard is 2 years behind, and at the end of the year we got him to a year behind, then I'm considering that a success. Because we grew you, because you're on the path to getting better. The problem is when we see this flat line. Everything should be consistently getting better. That's what we're looking toward. It's what I talk to them about all the time about my golf analogy. I love golf because, simply put, what's the perfect round of golf? It's 18 strokes. It's 18 holes in one. Nobody ever thinks that's possible. But when I played golf and became obsessed with it, I believed it was. Because what it pushed me is to always get better. That is what we're trying to make sure that it trickles down, that we're all consistently focused on getting better, no matter where we are. So that A campus, that doesn't mean you've achieved. You see? Because best isn't a destination. You don't arrive and stop. It is consistently getting better. That's what we have to do as a system. Do I know the answer? Absolutely not. I'm just going to tell you it's not that simplistic. But are we willing to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work? Absolutely. That's what we've been focused on so deeply. I'm off my soapbox, Deb.
This is like do the 1980s movie montage slow clap.
What? The slow clap? Yeah.
Not everybody believes that, unfortunately. I'm done.
Were you finished with your questions? Okay.
Where are we at?
We started on something and we totally.
Yeah.
Okay. It's what we do. Miss Huey, did you have anything?
No, I'm through crying now.
Oh, okay. All right.
If you want a perfect round 18 holes, try putt-putt.
No.
Oh, does anybody else have any other questions about this? Thank you again for the great presentation and all of the work. I know that I mean, this is constantly changing every day, every hour, every minute, maybe. So I understand what y'all are going through and appreciate it. And so we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
For,
The budget study session.
well, we'll see you Monday for our regular board meeting, but for budget study, we're not doing any budget study then,
No, ma'am.
correct? Okay. Yeah, so, all right. So with that, oh, I don't have an adjournment on me here. I'll say item 6, adjournment, and the time is 7:29. Thank you all for being here. Have a great night.